All right, part 2. A little bit trickier now. Okay, this word approximate. Hard to believe that as soon as I let you have a calculator, the question gets harder. Approximate means we're no longer using exact values that you've memorized. It means you're going to have to use a calculator and you're rounding off. Okay, so let's think about negative 416 degrees. How far is that? Well, negative 360 gets you to the x-axis, and then it's going to be another negative 56 degrees. The problem is you should never use a negative when you're using your calculator. Okay, you should always use the positive, the reference angle. So if we're here, what is the reference angle? The reference angle is 56 degrees. Okay, so now when I write sine of negative 416, cosine of negative 416, and tan of negative 416, I'm not thinking about 416 degrees, I'm thinking about 56 degrees. Okay, that negative just tells you what direction the angle is, it tells you what quadrant we end up in. Alright, and if you remember in quadrant 4, what we're going to have is cosine is going to be positive, sine and tan will be negative. Okay, so let me just finish writing these out, and then we'll write them in. Okay, so how are you going to figure out sine of negative 416? Well, you should put in sine of 56. Sine of 56 is decimal 8290375, etc., etc. Maybe we'll make a little note here. Okay, always, love that word always 3 decimals, unless it says something different. Okay, now before you delete that off your calculator, let's go and figure this one out, because it's the reciprocal of sine. How do we get from decimal 829 to cosecant? Well, you don't delete it off your calculator, just go 1 divided by, and then whatever you just had on the calculator. That's what you want to put in there. Okay, now don't like type in negative 0.829. Try to use what was on the calculator. All right, that's a better way of doing it. So this is negative 1.206. Okay, now let's go cos of 56. This is 0.675. Okay. So this is 1.483, I believe. Okay. 56 tan, that is 1.483. And then I think this is going to be 0.675. Check those if they are correct, but I believe they are. Okay. You can try this one, and then I'll put the answers for you. Alright, here are the answers. Again, we're thinking 46 degrees, not 586 degrees. And then remember that the sine, based on cast, sine and cos will both be negative. So will cosecant and secant. Notice the secant one, there's a little bit of a strange one for rounding off. If you round off the 6 and you look at the 9, that becomes 10. And so then you got to put 0 there, which moves a 3 to a 4. If that becomes hard for you and you kind of go, oh, I can't remember how to round off, I think I'm going to make a mistake. When in doubt, you can always put more decimals than needed. Okay, you'll never lose marks for more decimals, but you will if you round off to 2 decimals instead of 3. 4 is okay. 3 is what you're supposed to do. 2 is wrong. You lose half a mark. As well, if you round off incorrectly, you lose half a mark. So sometimes it's better just to write all the decimals you see, then you can't lose that half mark. Okay, So next question, very similar kind of question, just kind of comes at you with a little bit of a different slant. So instead of giving you the angle, it gives you a point. Okay, and remember this is a unit circle, so let's put this point up here, 3, 7. Okay, and if I draw a triangle in, this is 3, this is 7. You can then find the hypotenuse using Pythagoras, and you'd get, what is this, root 58? Okay, and so now if we're going to find the 6 trig ratios, we don't know what the angle is. Okay, we could find it, but we don't know what it is. And you're just going to write them as ratios instead of as decimals. Okay, so what is sine? Sine is opposite over hypotenuse, 7 over root 58. What is cosine? 3 over root 58. What is tan? 7 over 3. And then cosecant is just the reciprocal of sine. Secant is the reciprocal of cosine, and cotan is the reciprocal of tan. All right. Same thing for this one. Why don't you give it a try and I'll put up the answers. All right, so these are the answers, the ratios. Couple of quick comments. How do I get the hypotenuse? You're using Pythagoras. A squared plus b squared is c squared. The hypotenuse will always be positive. Okay. A few notation things. When you get to grade 12, notation is really important. Make sure you always write your thetas in. The word cotan by itself means nothing. Cotan of an angle is a ratio. The word sine without the theta is a sin. Okay? You'll go to hell if you do that. Please don't do that. All right? Make sure you put the thetas in. Again, you don't need to rationalize the denominator. What would this look like if you looked in your answer key? Okay? The answer key will rationalize the denominator. Again, you don't need to, but how do you do that? If you want to check your answer, you would get negative 4 root 17 over 17. This is the same answer, rationalized. Neither one is better, but your textbook will always rationalize. Okay? Couple more here. So now again, the questions are really the same. They're just kind of thrown at you with a little bit of a different twist. Okay, so it says, suppose secant is 4. When you see secant is 4, you know cosine is 1 over 4. All right, and it says determine the exact values of the other trig ratios for theta between 0 and 180. So the angle is somewhere in here, but it says secant is positive. So the angle must be in quadrant 1. Okay, theta has to be here. All right, we also know that if secant is 4, that cosine is 1 over 4. Okay, so maybe we'll just make this a little bit bigger. It's going to look something like this. The picture's not important, but it's going to be 1 over 4. All right, and then using Pythagoras, you can figure out that this is going to be root 15. Okay, so now since it asks for all the trig ratios, sine theta, cos theta, tan theta, cosecant theta, secant theta, and cotan theta. Okay, it gave us secant is 4, so cosine is 1 over 4. So now you can figure out the rest. Sine is root 15 over 4. Tan is root 15. Cosecant is 4 over root 15. And cotan is 1 over root 15. Okay, so that's A. Take a look at B. B says, to the nearest degree, determine the possible values of theta in the domain from negative 360 to 360. That's something totally different. It's not too hard to figure out what theta is, this angle here. But negative 360 to 360 is a little trickier. So let's try and do that. All right, I'm going to use this trig ratio because it was given to me because of the secant. So I'm going to find And I'm going to put theta r here because sometimes we're not finding the actual angle. Sometimes we're finding the reference angle. And so how do you find the reference angle? This is the inverse cos. You're going to grab your calculator and go inverse cos of 1/4. All right, so the reference angle is 76 degrees. By the way, when you're doing degrees, we don't use the decimals. We'll round off to the whole degree. So that's 76 degrees, but it says we're allowed to go from negative 360 to 360. That means I can go all the way around this way. Well, there's only one angle, that's 76 degrees. But what if I went this way? What's the coterminal angle? Okay, so theta is 76. It's also 76 take away 360, which equals negative 284. Okay. Last one. Find the value of, I think this, yeah, last one. Find the value of sine if cosine is negative 4/5 and tan is positive. Quick sketch. Cosine is negative 4/5. If it's negative, it could be here or here. But then it says tan is positive. Which of these two quadrants is tan positive in? Only this one. So we are looking in the third quadrant. So let's draw that. Okay, so cosine is negative 4/5. You should recognize that as a 3, 4, 5 triangle. So a squared plus b squared is c squared. It turns out to be negative 3. So what is sine? Sine is negative 3/5. Okay? Let's leave it at that. I believe that's it for today. You know, I'm just going to make one quick comment before we go a little further here with the homework. Right here, whenever you're finding a reference angle, we'll see this again, but always use, and I told you this last year, always use a positive value. Never, ever use a negative value. So for example, if we were looking at this question here and I said, what's theta? I would say you would use the inverse of positive 3/5. Okay, and that would give you the reference angle. That would give you this angle here. All right, so that's a little star there when I'm talking about the reference angle. Always use positive. All right, there's your homework. We will continue on later.